Hello, and welcome to Basics for Gamers presents the basics of runes in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. In this first part of the series, we're going to cover what runes are and how they work. And in part 2, we'll examine other related topics like how to upgrade a rune, how to remove a rune from its item, or transfer a rune from one item to another. Most magic weapons and armor gain their special properties through runes. Runes represent ancient secrets and magical science that bestow power to items that they're engraved upon. And they take two forms: fundamental runes and property runes. Fundamental runes provide the most basic and common magical effects. For weapons, these runes increase attack bonus and damage, and for armor, these runes provide a bonus to armor class and saves. And property runes grant many other effects beyond the basic enchantments provided by fundamental runes, for example, making a suit of armor resistant to acid damage or setting a longsword on fire. Let's take a closer look at fundamental runes first. There are two kinds of fundamental runes for armor, and those are armor potency runes and resilient runes. Armor potency runes grant an item bonus to armor class, and the number of the bonus also indicates the maximum number of property runes that the item can have. So a suit of +1 leather armor means it is a suit of leather armor and gets a +1 item bonus to armor class. In addition, the potency rune makes the armor magical, and it will register to spells like Detect Magic and Read Aura. The +1 potency rune also means this leather armor may have one property rune etched on it as well. The second fundamental rune for armor is Resilient. Resilient runes grant a bonus to all saves and come in three varieties: Resilient, Greater Resilient, and Major Resilient. Each of those runes increases the bonus to saves by 1. So Resilient runes are +1 to saves, Greater Resilient runes are +2, and Major Resilient runes are +3. Remember, when you see the name of a suit of armor, the plus value in the name refers to its armor potency rune and is also the bonus it receives to armor class. That plus number has nothing to do with a resilient rune and its bonus to saves. Instead, the armor will have the word resilient for a +1 to saves. The name will say greater resilient for a +2 to saves, or major resilient for a +3 to all saves. Fundamental runes for weapons function in much the same way. The first fundamental rune for weapons is weapon potency. When a potency rune is added to a weapon, it is shown as a plus number in the weapon's name, so a +2 battle axe has a +2 weapon potency rune etched on it. And that plus number is both the item bonus added to attack rolls, as well as the number of property runes the weapon can have. And remember that plus value is only added to attack rolls. It does not grant a bonus to damage. Instead, to increase the weapon's damage, you'll want to etch the second kind of weapon fundamental rune, which is called striking. Striking runes can increase the number of damage dice rolled with the weapon. A striking rune increases the weapon's damage to 2 dice. A greater striking rune increases base damage to 3 dice, and a major striking rune increases base damage to 4 dice. So, if you add a striking rune to a longsword, it will deal 2d8 damage on a hit instead of 1d8. And remember, this is an increase to the weapon's base damage dice, so anytime the weapon dice are modified, the extra damage from striking are also modified as well. For example, the two-hand trait changes the weapon's base damage dice, so a +1 striking broadsword does 2d8 damage when used with one hand, and 2d12 damage when used in both hands, not 1d12 plus 1d8. And the damage due to striking is also increased if the effect specifically says it is. For example, the deadly trait states that its damage is increased if the weapon has a greater or major striking rune, therefore the number of deadly dice are increased. But not if the weapon has just a regular striking rune. But striking runes do not increase the damage dice of damaging effects that are in addition to the base physical weapon damage, like bonus damage from a sneak attack would not be increased because of a striking rune, or fire damage caused by a flaming weapon that also would not be increased due to a striking rune. As mentioned before, there are two kinds of runes. Fundamental runes are the core runes that provide basic enhancements, and the second type of runes are property runes. Simply put, property runes let the armor or weapon do all kinds of other cool stuff beyond the basic things that come from fundamental runes. Want to give your sword the Vorpal quality or wear armor that can turn you invisible? Then you need to add property runes. When you look at a property rune stat block, you'll see some effects are passive and always occur when the item is in use. For example, armor etched with a shadow rune grants its benefit whenever the armor is worn and invested. But other runes, like the shifting rune, require you to activate the item. In this case, it takes a single action to use the shifting rune special properties. There are way too many property runes to go over all of them here, but it's pretty simple. You would just treat those property runes in a very similar way that you would any other magical item. The key difference being that runes cannot be used on their own, they must be attached to another item. It's also important to remember that there are limits to how many runes a single item can have etched on it. Each weapon or suit of armor can have one potency rune and either one resilient rune if it is armor, or one striking rune if it is a weapon, and then can have as many property runes as the bonus provided by its potency rune. So for example, a +1 longsword has a +1 weapon potency rune etched on it. A +1 striking longsword has a +1 weapon potency rune and a striking rune, and a +1 striking flaming longsword has a +1 weapon potency rune, a striking rune, and a flaming rune. This longsword cannot gain a second property rune until it first increases its potency rune to +2. And since the striking rune is a fundamental rune, it does not count against the number of property runes the sword can have. And note that an item cannot have more than one of the same type of rune. So you couldn't have two +1 potency runes and instead would start with a single +1 potency rune and then upgrade it to +2. We'll talk more about upgrading runes in the next video of this series. In this video, we discussed the basics of runes. Runes are used to grant magical properties to weapons and armor. There are two types of runes, fundamental runes and property runes. The fundamental runes for weapons are weapon potency runes that provide an item bonus to attacks and are noted in the item's name by a plus value, and striking runes that increase the number of damage dice that are rolled with the weapon. The fundamental runes for armor are armor potency and resilient. Armor potency runes provide an item bonus to armor class and are noted in the item's name as a plus value. And resilient runes grant a bonus to all saves. The second type of runes are property runes. These add a wide variety of other magical effects to the item. Each magical item may have one potency rune, either one striking or one resilient rune depending on if it is a weapon or armor, and may have no more property runes than the plus value of its potency rune. Also, magical items may not have multiple copies of the same kind of rune, for example, 2 resilient runes or 2 flaming runes. In the next video of this series, we will expand this conversation by covering topics such as how to upgrade a rune, how to remove a rune from an item, and how to transfer a rune from one item to another. Before we close, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our patrons. These videos would not be possible without their continued generosity and support. Members of the Basics for Gamers Patreon community receive special benefits, like getting to vote on the topics that we cover in the future, and also they get to see these videos 1 week and ad-free before everybody else. Visit the link shown on the left of the screen and in the description if you'd like to know more about becoming a patron. If you would like to support this channel and help it grow, the easiest way to do that is by subscribing and clicking the bell icon so you get notified when new videos release. And we can always be reached through our Twitter and Facebook pages too. Thanks for watching, take care, and we will see you soon with more Basics of Pathfinder.